The dirt beneath Quinton Xavier's boots was the same color as dried blood, and he was thinking about dying when he saw her crumbling bread for sparrows in the alley behind the saloon. It was August 1882 in El Paso, Texas, and the heat made the air shimmer like water, but she stood perfectly still in her faded calico dress, breaking apart what looked like her last piece of cornbread with careful fingers. The birds hopped closer, unafraid, and something in Quinton's chest cracked open like an egg. He had been walking back to his horse after 3 days of trailing rustlers through the Franklin Mountains, thinking about how empty his life felt despite the coins jangling in his saddlebag. The bounty would buy him another month of drifting, another month of cheap whiskey and cheaper beds, another month of wondering why he kept breathing when so many better men had stopped. Then he turned the corner and saw her, and suddenly dying seemed like the worst idea he had ever entertained. She was not beautiful in the way saloon girls were beautiful, all rouge and ringlets and practiced smiles. Her dark blonde hair hung in a simple braid down her back, and her dress had been mended so many times it was more patches than original fabric. But her face held something he had not seen in years, maybe ever. Kindness. Real kindness, the kind that cost something. The last crumb fell from her fingers. The sparrows descended in a flutter of wings. She watched them with a small smile, her hand pressed briefly to her stomach as if to quiet its complaints, and Quinton knew with absolute certainty that he was looking at the woman who would either save him or destroy him completely. "That was your breakfast, was not it?" he said, his voice rougher than he intended. She startled, spinning to face him. Her eyes were gray like morning fog over the Rio Grande, and they went wide with surprise before narrowing with wariness. A woman alone learned to be careful around strange men, especially in El Paso, where the law was more suggestion than rule. "I had already eaten," she lied, and the lie was so transparent and so brave that Quinton felt something shift in his chest again, some tectonic plate of his heart moving after years of being frozen. "You are a terrible liar," he said, but he said it gently. "Come on. Let me buy you breakfast at the hotel restaurant. I do not take charity from strangers." She lifted her chin, and he saw pride there, the kind of pride that kept a person's spine straight even when everything else was falling apart. Not charity. Payment. "I need someone to tell me about this town, and you look like someone who knows things. Consider it hiring a guide." He was making it up as he went along, but her stomach growled loud enough for both of them to hear, and a flush of color rose in her pale cheeks. "I am not a guide," she said. "Then I am not buying you breakfast. I am conducting business." He held out his hand. "Quinton Xavier. People call me Quinn." She looked at his hand for a long moment, and he could see her working through the calculation. Pride versus hunger, independence versus necessity. Finally, she took his hand. Her fingers were thin and cold despite the heat. "Lena Garrett," she said. "And I only know about El Paso because I have been stuck here for 3 months, not because I am any kind of guide." 3 months is 3 months more than me," Quinn said. "Come on." Before the hotel stopped serving, she walked beside him down the dusty street, maintaining a careful distance that said she was still deciding whether he was dangerous. Smart woman. He was dangerous, just not to her. Never to her, though he could not have explained why he was so certain. The hotel restaurant was nearly empty. Just a drummer sleeping off a drunk in the corner, and a Mexican family sharing a pot of coffee. The waitress looked at Lena's worn dress with barely concealed disdain, but she brought menus when Quinn sat down and gestured for Lena to take the chair across from him. "Order whatever you want," he said. "The biscuits and gravy," Lena said immediately, then added, "and scrambled eggs if that is acceptable." "Make it 2 plates," Quinn told the waitress. "And a pot of coffee." strong. Lena's hands were folded in her lap, her back straight despite what must have been gnawing hunger. She looked around the restaurant like she was memorizing it, or like she was afraid someone would throw her out before the food arrived. "So what has you stuck in El Paso?" Quinn asked. The wariness returned to her eyes. "That is a personal question for someone you just met. You said you were going to tell me about the town. Start with how you ended up here." She was quiet for a moment, and he thought she might refuse. But then the coffee arrived, and she wrapped her hands around the cup like it was precious, and something in her seemed to loosen. "I came from Kansas with my father. He was a carpenter, heard there was work in El Paso with all the building going on since the railroad came through. We had a wagon and supplies and plans to start over." She stopped, staring into her coffee. "He died 2 days outside of town. Heart gave out. Just fell over one afternoon, gone before he hit the ground." "I am sorry," Quinn said, and meant it. "I made it to El Paso with the wagon and sold everything to pay for his burial and a room at a boarding house. Been looking for work since, but there is not much call for a single woman without skills or family." She said it matter-of-factly, but he heard the exhaustion beneath the words. "The money ran out last week. I have been staying in a storage shed behind the boarding house. The owner is a kind woman, lets me sleep there in exchange for cleaning." "Is that legal? Just letting you live in a shed?" "Legal does not matter much when the alternative is the street." She looked up at him then, and her eyes were hard. "I am not telling you this for sympathy. You wanted to know about the town. This is what it is. El Paso is full of people trying to make something from nothing, and most of them are failing." The food arrived before he could respond, and he watched Lena struggle not to fall on her plate like a starving animal. She ate with careful, deliberate bites, chewing thoroughly, making it last. It was the saddest thing he had ever seen. "What about you?" she asked after she had eaten half her plate. "What brings a bounty hunter to El Paso?" "How did you know I was a bounty hunter? You have that look. And the way you carry your gun like it is part of your arm." She gestured at the Colt at his hip. "Plus you said you needed to know about the town, which means you are either new or looking for someone." "Both, actually." He sipped his coffee. "Delivered 3 rustlers to the marshal this morning. Thought I might stay a few days, see if there is more work." "There is always work for men like you. El Paso is barely controlled chaos. The Rangers do what they can, but there are only so many of them and so much territory." They ate in silence for a few minutes. Quinn found himself watching the way she held her fork, the precise way she cut her biscuits. Even in poverty, she maintained dignity. It was remarkable. "Where are you from originally?" she asked. "Everywhere." "Nowhere. Born in Missouri, but my family moved around a lot. Both parents died when I was 14, been on my own since." "No siblings?" "Had a brother. He died at Shiloh." Quinn pushed eggs around his plate. "Joined up when he was 16, lied about his age. Got shot in the throat his first real battle. Took him 2 days to die." "That is terrible." "It was a long time ago. 20 years, but some wounds never really closed. After that, I just drifted. Odd jobs at first. Then I found I was good at tracking, at finding people who did not want to be found. Became a bounty hunter about 10 years back." "Do you like it?" No one had ever asked him that before. "I am good at it." "That is not the same as liking it." "No," he admitted. "I suppose it is not." She finished her eggs and set down her fork with a small sigh of satisfaction. "Thank you for breakfast. That was the best meal I have had in weeks." "When did you last eat before this?" "Yesterday. A woman at the church gave me half a sandwich after I cleaned the pews." "Yesterday. Christ." And she had been feeding birds with her breakfast. Quinn made a decision that surprised him with its clarity and speed. "I need to hire someone," he said. Lena's eyes narrowed. "For what?" "Just general help. I am going to be in town for a while, need someone who knows their way around, someone to run errands, maybe do some cooking. I will pay fair wages and put you up in a real room. I am not a prostitute." Her voice was ice. "I am not asking you to be. I am offering legitimate work." He leaned forward. "Look, I have money from the bounty and I am tired of eating restaurant food and sleeping alone in hotel rooms. I need help, you need work. It is a business arrangement." "Why me?" "Because you fed birds when you were starving," he said simply. "That tells me more about your character than any reference could." She studied him for a long time, those gray eyes searching his face for deception. "What exactly would my duties be?" "Whatever needs doing. Washing clothes, cooking meals, running messages. Nothing improper. You would have your own room with a lock on the door. I would never enter without permission. And if I say yes and then you change the terms, then you leave and I pay you for the time worked. No questions, no consequences." He held her gaze. "I give you my word, the word of a bounty hunter and a stranger, the only word I have got." She was quiet for a long moment, and he could see her thinking it through, weighing risks and options. Finally, she nodded slowly. 1 week trial. If at any point I feel unsafe or if you change the terms, I walk away." "Agreed." He held out his hand again, and this time when she took it, her grip was firm. "When do I start?" "Right now. First order of business is getting you a real meal for lunch and finding you decent lodging." "I thought you said you were staying at a hotel." "I am." "The Camino Real. They have got rooms for staff on the top floor, small but clean and safe. I will rent one for you." "That will cost money." "I have money. That is what money is for." She looked at him with a mixture of suspicion and desperate hope. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I saw you feeding birds and something in me recognized something in you. Because I am tired of being alone. Because for the first time in 20 years, I want to be near another human being without armor or distance. Because you are going to save me, and I do not even know from what yet." "Because I can," he said. They left the restaurant and walked through the midday heat toward the Camino Real Hotel. El Paso was alive with sound and movement. Freight wagons rumbling down the street, vendors calling out their wares in Spanish and English, somewhere a piano playing badly. The town had exploded since the Southern Pacific reached it the previous year, transforming from a sleepy border settlement into a raucous boomtown. People came from everywhere looking for opportunity, and most found only hardship. The Camino Real was one of the nicer buildings, 3 stories of adobe brick with real glass windows and a lobby that smelled of beeswax and leather. The clerk, a fastidious man with spectacles and a waxed mustache, looked up when they entered. "Mr. Xavier, how can I help you?" "I need to rent one of the staff rooms on the 3rd floor, long term." The clerk's eyes slid to Lena, and his expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "Those rooms are generally reserved for employees of the hotel." "I am aware. I will pay double the normal rate." Quinn placed a $20 gold piece on the counter. The clerk's expression shifted immediately. "Of course, sir. Right away." He produced a key. "Room 17. 3rd floor, east side, overlooks the courtyard, so it is quieter than the street side. I will also need a bath drawn and sent up, and have someone deliver a meal. Beef stew if the kitchen has it, and bread. Fresh bread." "Certainly, sir." The clerk was all obsequiousness now, the gold having transformed Lena from suspicious woman to respectable client. Quinn handed the key to Lena. "Go on up and get settled. I will bring your things from the boarding house." "I do not have things, just a spare dress and a shawl. Then I will bring those." She clutched the key like it might dissolve. "You are really doing this?" "I am really doing this. Go on." She hesitated, then nodded and headed for the stairs. Quinn watched her go, noting the way her shoulders straightened as she climbed, as if the simple act of having a destination restored some part of her that had been compressed. "Your wife, sir?" the clerk asked with studied casualness. "Employee," Quinn said flatly. "And if anyone in this hotel bothers her or implies anything improper, I will take it personally. Are we clear?" The clerk paled. "Crystal clear, sir." "Good." Quinn left the hotel and made his way to the boarding house Lena had mentioned. It was a tired building on a tired street, but the woman who answered the door had a kind face and knowing eyes. "You are here about Lena," she said without preamble. "I am. She is working for me now. I came to collect her belongings." The woman, who introduced herself as Mrs. Halstead, studied him with the same careful assessment Lena had used. "She is a good girl, good heart. Life has been cruel to her. I am not here to make it crueler. See that you do not." She led him through the boarding house to a storage shed out back. Inside, among crates and broken furniture, was a small nest of blankets and a carpet bag. The sight of it made Quinn angry in a way he had not been angry in years. "She has been sleeping here." "I offered my parlor couch, but she refused, too proud, said the shed was fine." Mrs. Halstead sighed. "I gave her food when I could, but I am a widow on a fixed income. I could not do more." "You did what you could. That is more than most." Quinn picked up the carpet bag. It weighed almost nothing. "You going to treat her right?" "I am going to try." Mrs. Halstead nodded. "That is all anyone can do. Tell her she is welcome here for tea any time." "She knows that, but tell her again." Quinn returned to the hotel with Lena's meager possessions and knocked on the door to room 17. "It is Quinn. Come in." She was standing at the window looking out at the courtyard, still wearing her patched dress. The room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, a wardrobe, and a single chair. Compared to a storage shed, it must have seemed like a palace. "I brought your things." He set the carpet bag on the bed. "Thank you." She did not turn from the window. "There are flowers down there." In the courtyard. "Real flowers growing in pots. I have not seen flowers in months. You can go down and look at them whenever you want. You live here now." She finally turned to face him. Her eyes were wet. "Why are you being so kind to me, Lena?" "I am not being kind. I am being decent." There is a difference. Kindness is extra. Decency is the baseline, and the fact that you think this is unusual says terrible things about how the world has treated you. "The world treats most people terribly. I am not special." "I think you might be." The words came out before he could stop them, and they hung in the air between them, too honest and too raw. She looked at him for a long moment. "I do not even know you." "No, but maybe you will." A knock at the door interrupted whatever she might have said next. The bath arrived, a large copper tub carried by 2 hotel employees who filled it with steaming water from buckets. Behind them came a maid with the meal Quinn had ordered, which she set on the small table by the window. When they were alone again, Quinn moved toward the door. "I will leave you to get cleaned up and rest. I am in room 7, second floor. If you need anything, tell the desk clerk and they will find me." "When should I start working?" "Tomorrow is soon enough. Today, just recover." "Quinn." She said his name like she was testing it. "Thank you." "You already thanked me. I mean for believing me, about already eating, even though it was a lie. You are welcome." He closed the door behind him and stood in the hallway for a moment, his heart doing something strange and arrhythmic in his chest. He barely knew her. One conversation over breakfast, and he was renting her rooms and buying her meals and feeling things he had not felt since before his brother died. It was insane. It was reckless. It was the most alive he had felt in 2 decades. Quinn spent the afternoon making arrangements. He visited a dressmaker and ordered 3 practical dresses for Lena, good sturdy cotton in blue and brown and green. He stopped at a general store and bought her a new pair of boots, a shawl, a hairbrush, and a small mirror. He visited the bank and deposited most of his bounty money, keeping enough cash to support them both for a couple of months. Then he went to the marshal's office to see if there was more work available. Marshal William Stone was an old ranger, weathered and competent, with a reputation for fairness in a town not known for it. He looked up when Quinn entered, recognition crossing his face. "Xavier, heard you brought in the Rodriguez brothers. Good work." They were not particularly clever rustlers. Most are not. Still, saved us the trouble of tracking them ourselves. Stone leaned back in his chair. "Looking for more work? Depends on what you have got. Always something. We have got a problem with someone robbing the stagecoach route between here and Fort Hancock. 3 robberies in the past month. No one killed yet, but it is only a matter of time. Stage company is offering $500 for whoever stops it. Any leads? Nothing solid. Whoever it is knows the route and timing well. Inside information, most likely. Driver or someone from the company." Stone pulled out a map. "Hits always happen in this stretch here, about 10 miles west of town. Rough country, easy to disappear into." Quinn studied the map. "I will look into it." "Figured you might. Just watch yourself. Whoever this is, they are smart and careful. Bad combination." Quinn left the marshal's office as the sun was beginning its descent toward the mountains. El Paso in the evening light was almost beautiful, the adobe buildings turning golden, the harsh edges softened. He found himself thinking about Lena up in her room, soaking in a hot bath, eating a real meal. Thinking about her alone made him smile, and that was unusual enough to give him pause. He ate dinner in the hotel restaurant, some kind of beef in brown gravy that was better than expected. The dining room filled up as evening came on, ranchers and businessmen and the occasional gambler, all talking over each other about cattle prices and railroad schedules and politics. Quinn listened with half an ear, picking up useful information out of habit. After dinner, he went to his own room and tried to read a week-old newspaper, but his mind kept wandering up one floor to room 17. He wondered if Lena was sleeping. He wondered if she felt safe for the first time in months. He wondered what she thought of him, this stranger who had inserted himself into her life with offers of employment and help. He wondered if she could tell that he was already half in love with her. The thought should have terrified him. Love made you vulnerable, made you weak, made you care about someone else's survival more than your own. He had watched love destroy his parents when his brother died, had seen his mother turn to laudanum and his father to whiskey until they were both just ghosts haunting their own lives. He had sworn he would never let himself become that compromised. But then he had seen her feeding birds with her last crumbs, and all his carefully constructed walls had come tumbling down. Sleep did not come easy that night. The next morning, Quinn woke early and went downstairs to find Lena already waiting in the lobby. She was wearing her old dress, but her hair was freshly washed and braided, and there was color in her cheeks that had not been there yesterday. She looked rested. She looked hopeful. "Good morning," she said. "I was not sure what time you wanted me to start. Morning. You did not have to come down so early. I wanted to earn my keep." He wanted to tell her that she did not have to earn anything, that he would have given her the room regardless, but he sensed she needed to feel useful. Pride was important. Pride was what kept people standing. "Have you eaten?" he asked. "Not yet." "Come on then." "Breakfast first, then I will explain what I need." They ate in the restaurant again, and Quinn noticed that Lena ate more confidently today, less afraid the food would be snatched away. Small progress, but progress nonetheless. "So what do you need me to do?" she asked over coffee. "Honestly, I was not lying when I said I could use help. I am going to be investigating the stagecoach robberies, which means I will be gone for stretches. I need someone to manage things here. Collect my mail, keep my room in order, run errands, maybe do some cooking if you are able." "I can cook. My mother taught me before she died." Lena hesitated. "Is that really all? It does not seem like enough work to justify room and board." "It is enough, and I will pay you wages on top of the room, $2 a week to start." "That is too much." "That is what I decided." "Do not argue with your employer." He said it with a small smile, and after a moment she smiled back. It transformed her face, made her look younger and less guarded. "Yes, sir, Mr. Xavier. Quinn, just Quinn." "Quinn," she repeated, and he liked the way his name sounded in her voice. They spent the morning in a comfortable routine. Quinn showed her where he kept his things in room 7, explained his preferences for how his clothes should be washed and pressed, gave her money for any supplies she might need. She took mental notes of everything, asking clarifying questions, efficient and organized despite having lived in a shed for weeks. "I am going to ride out this afternoon to look at the stagecoach route," Quinn said around noon. "I will probably be gone until tomorrow. Will you be all right here?" "I will be fine. I am used to taking care of myself." "I know. But if you need anything or if anyone bothers you, go to the desk clerk. I left instructions that you are to be treated as my employee and nothing else." "Thank you." She said it seriously, understanding what he was really saying. That he had drawn a protective line around her, at least within the walls of this hotel. "I mean it. Anything at all you tell them to find me. I will." He left her organizing his room with quiet competence and went to the livery to collect his horse, a reliable roan gelding named Jack that had carried him through 3 states and countless miles. The stable boy had kept him well groomed and fed, and Jack nickered softly when Quinn approached. "Miss me, boy." Quinn stroked the horse's neck and checked his shoes. "All good." He saddled up, loaded his saddlebags with supplies for an overnight trip, and headed west out of El Paso toward Fort Hancock. The country opened up once you left town. Endless stretches of sand and scrub broken by rocky outcrops and the occasional cluster of mesquite. The heat was oppressive even though it was only mid-morning, and Quinn was grateful for his wide-brimmed hat. This was hard land, unforgiving land, the kind of place that killed careless people without a second thought. He reached the area the marshal had indicated by early afternoon, a narrow stretch where the road wound between high rock walls. Perfect ambush territory. Quinn dismounted and spent an hour searching the area on foot, looking for tracks or signs of recent activity. He found plenty. Hoof prints from multiple horses, cartridge casings, and places where people had waded in the rocks above the road. Whoever was robbing the stages was doing it from above, probably at least 3 people based on the tracks. They waited until the stage entered the narrow section, then opened fire or called down, forcing the driver to stop. Quick robbery, then retreat into the rocks where pursuit would be difficult. Smart, efficient, professional, Quinn climbed up into the rocks and found the spot they had been using as a lookout. Cigarette butts, more cartridge casings, and something interesting, a scrap of fabric caught on a thorn bush. Dark blue cloth, quality wool. Not the kind of thing a typical outlaw would wear in this heat. He pocketed it and continued his search. By evening, he had a reasonable picture of how the operation worked, but no solid leads on who was behind it. He made camp in a sheltered spot away from the road, built a small fire, and ate jerky and hardtack while watching the sun set over the mountains. In the dying light, everything turned purple and gold, achingly beautiful in the way harsh places could be. He found himself thinking about Lena again, wondering what she was doing, if she had eaten dinner, if she felt safe in her small room. The intensity of his concern surprised him. He barely knew her, Yet she had taken up residence in his thoughts like she belonged there. Maybe she did. The night was clear and cold, the way desert nights always were, the temperature dropping 40 degrees after sundown. Quinn wrapped himself in his bedroll and watched stars wheel overhead. Somewhere in the darkness, a coyote called out, lonely and wild. He understood that loneliness. Had lived with it so long he had forgotten it was not normal. But now he had met someone who made him remember what it felt like to want something more than just survival. He rode back to El Paso the next morning and went straight to the marshal's office. Stone looked up from his paperwork when Quinn entered. Find anything. They are working from the rocks above the road. At least 3 people, maybe 4. Professional setup, well planned. Quinn pulled out the fabric scrap. Found this caught on a bush. Quality wool, expensive. Any wealthy people in town with a grudge against the stage company. Stone examined the fabric. Could be anyone. Half the businessmen in El Paso wear wool suits even in summer. Think it makes them look respectable. What about employees? Anyone fired recently or passed over for promotion? I will ask around. Good work, Xavier. Stone handed back the fabric. Watch yourself out there. Quinn left the marshal's office and returned to the hotel, suddenly eager to see Lena again. He told himself it was just to check that everything was all right, that she had not run into any problems, but he knew he was lying. He found her in his room mending one of his shirts with small, precise stitches. She looked up when he entered, and her face brightened in a way that made his heart stutter. "You are back," she said, then seemed to catch herself. "I mean, welcome back. Did you find what you were looking for?" "Some leads, nothing solid yet." He dropped his saddlebags by the door. "How were things here?" "Quiet. I washed your other shirts and had them pressed. There is a very good Chinese laundry on Mesa Street. They do excellent work." She set down her sewing. "And I bought supplies for dinner if you are hungry. I thought I could cook for us in the hotel kitchen. The manager said I could use it as long as I cleaned up after. You did not have to do that. I wanted to. It has been a long time since I cooked for anyone." She stood, brushing lint from her skirt. "Give me an hour, I will bring it to your room." "Lena, you do not have to serve me like a maid. I am not. I am earning my wages." But she said it with that small smile again, and he realized she was teasing him gently. "All right. An hour then." She left, and Quinn stripped off his dusty clothes and washed at the basin. His shirt had a tear in the shoulder from catching on a branch, and he noticed it had already been mended. Lena's work, small, careful stitches that were almost invisible. She was taking care of him, and it had been so long since anyone had cared whether he had mended clothes or hot meals that he felt something dangerous rising in his chest. True to her word, an hour later she knocked and entered carrying a tray. The smell made his mouth water instantly. Roasted chicken, potatoes, greens, and fresh bread. A real meal, home-cooked, the kind he had not had since before his parents died. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" he asked after the first bite. "My mother, like I said. She said a woman who could cook would never starve." Lena's face clouded. She was wrong about that, but the cooking part was right at least. "What happened to her? Fever when I was 16. Went fast. 1 week she was fine, the next she was gone." Lena picked at her own food. "My father never really recovered. He loved her more than anything in the world. After she died, he was just going through the motions. I think coming to Texas was his way of trying to outrun the grief." "Did it work?" "No. Grief has a way of catching up no matter how far you run." She looked at him directly. "You know that, though." "I do." They ate in comfortable silence for a while. Quinn found himself watching the way she held her fork, the small crease that appeared between her eyebrows when she was thinking. She was becoming familiar to him in a way that should have taken months, not days. "Can I ask you something?" Lena said finally, "Anything." "Why bounty hunting? You could do something else. You are smart, educated, I can tell by the way you talk. My brother and I used to track together when we were boys. Hunting game mostly, but sometimes we would help find lost cattle or horses. I was good at it. After he died, it was one of the few things that made sense. Reading signs, following trails. It was concrete, real, not like the rest of life. He pushed food around his plate. And I suppose there is something satisfying about bringing bad people to justice. Feels like maybe I am balancing the scales a little bit. Do you think the scales can be balanced? Probably not. But it gives me something to do. That is a lonely way to live. It has been, he admitted, but maybe it does not have to be. The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Lena's cheeks colored slightly, but she did not look away. I should clean up, she said softly. Leave it. I will take care of it later. That is not how employment works, Lena. He reached across the table and took her hand before he could think better of it. Her fingers were warm from holding her fork, and they curled slightly around his. I do not care about employment. I care that you ate enough dinner and that you have a safe place to sleep. Everything else is just details. You cannot take care of me. I am not a charity case. You are not charity. You are, he stopped, not sure how to finish that sentence. You are the woman I saw feeding birds and knew I had to know. You are the reason I am thinking about a future for the first time in 20 years. You are possibly the best thing that has ever happened to me, and I have known you less than 2 days. I am what? Her voice was barely a whisper. Important, he said finally. You are important. She looked at their joined hands, then slowly pulled hers away. I should go. It is getting late. Lena, thank you for dinner. Thank you for allowing me to cook dinner. I will see you tomorrow. She stood quickly and left before he could say anything else. Quinn sat alone in his room and stared at the closed door. He had pushed too hard, revealed too much. She was not ready to hear what he was feeling, might never be ready. She had been living in a shed a few days ago, hungry and alone. Of course, she was not prepared for some stranger to come along and upend her life with declarations of importance. He needed to slow down, give her space to adjust. But God, it was hard when all he wanted was to be near her. The next few days settled into a rhythm that was both comfortable and aching. Lena took her duties seriously, managing Quinn's affairs with quiet competence. She washed his clothes, organized his correspondence, cooked meals that made him feel almost human again. In return, he gave her space, respecting her boundaries, not pushing for more than she was ready to give. But the awareness between them grew anyway, thick and undeniable. He caught her watching him sometimes when she thought he was not looking. Once, while helping him with a torn jacket, her fingers brushed his shoulder and lingered a moment too long. Small moments, easily dismissed, but they accumulated like coins in a jar. Quinn continued investigating the stage robberies, riding out to interview drivers and passengers, mapping the pattern. He learned that the robberies always happened on Thursdays, always around noon, and the robbers always knew exactly how much money was being transported. Definitely inside information. He was at the stage company office questioning the manager, a nervous man named Pritchard, when a thought struck him. Who has access to your shipping manifests? Quinn asked. Only myself and my assistant, Marcus Webb. Why? Because someone is telling the robbers when your stages are carrying money. It has to be someone who knows the schedule and the cargo. Quinn leaned forward. Tell me about Webb. Pritchard shifted uncomfortably. Marcus has worked for me for 3 years. He is reliable, punctual. I cannot believe he would. Where does he live? A room above the hardware store on San Antonio Street. But really, I do not think Quinn was already leaving. He found the marshal and explained his theory. Stone agreed to come along, and they walked to the hardware store together. The stairway to the second-floor rooms was on the side of the building, and they climbed it quietly. "Mr. Webb," Stone knocked on the door firmly. "Marshal Stone, need to have a word." Silence. Then the sound of footsteps, too fast, heading away from the door. Quinn did not hesitate. He kicked the door open in time to see a thin man in a blue wool suit scrambling out the window onto the roof. "Go around back." Quinn shouted at Stone and followed Webb through the window. The chase across the rooftops of El Paso was brief and dangerous. Webb was desperate but not athletic, and Quinn had tracked fleeing men through worse terrain. He caught up with Webb 2 buildings over, tackling him before he could jump to the next roof. "It was not my idea," Webb gasped as Quinn hauled him to his feet. "They threatened me. Said they would kill me if I did not cooperate." "Who threatened you?" "I do not know their names. 3 men. They came to me 2 months ago, said they knew I was in debt from gambling, said I could pay it off by giving them information." "Where do they hide after the robberies?" "I do not know, I swear. They just told me to leave the manifests under a rock by the old mission. I never met them again." Stone arrived with 2 deputies, and they hauled Webb off to jail. Quinn searched the room and found gambling debts totaling over $300 and a suit made of the same blue wool as the fabric scrap. Not the mastermind then, just a weak link exploited by smarter criminals. "We still do not know who the actual robbers are," Stone said, frustrated. "No, but now they do not have inside information anymore. Next time they hit a stage, they will be guessing. That is when they will make a mistake." Quinn handed over the evidence he had collected. "Set up a decoy. Spread word that Thursday's stage will be carrying a big payroll. I will be waiting. You want to catch them in the act. Only way to be sure we get all of them." Stone considered, then nodded. "All right, but I am sending deputies as backup. This could get messy." Quinn spent the next few days preparing. He rode the route repeatedly, finding the best position to set up an ambush. He cleaned his guns obsessively, checked his ammunition, made sure Jack was rested and ready. And through it all, he was aware of Lena watching him with growing concern. "You are going to do something dangerous," she said one evening while they shared dinner in his room. "It is my job. That does not mean I have to like it." She set down her fork. "When? Thursday. That is tomorrow, I know." She was quiet for a moment, her hands clasped in her lap. "Will you be careful?" "I am always careful." "Will you come back?" The question was small and scared, and it broke something open in Quinn's chest. He reached across the table and took her hand, and this time she did not pull away. "I will come back," he said. "I promise." "You cannot promise that, not in your line of work." "Then I promise I will do everything in my power to come back, because I have something worth coming back to now." Her eyes went wide. "Quinn, I know it is too soon. I know you probably think I am crazy. But I have never been more certain of anything in my life." He held her hand tighter. "You matter to me, Lena, more than you should after such a short time, more than is probably wise, but it is true, and I need you to know it before I ride out tomorrow. I am terrified," she whispered. "Of me. Of this. Of feeling something for you when I barely know you. Of losing something I just found." Tears welled in her eyes. "Everyone I have ever cared about has died or left. I cannot do that again." "You will not have to. I will come back." He stood and moved around the table, kneeling beside her chair. "I will come back, and then maybe you can give me a chance to prove that I am worth caring about." She looked down at him, tears spilling over, and then she did something that surprised them both. She leaned down and kissed him, soft and tentative, her lips tasting of salt and sadness and hope. He kissed her back gently, one hand coming up to cup her cheek. It was a promise and a plea and a beginning all at once. When they broke apart, she was crying harder, but she was also smiling. "Come back," she said. "Please come back." "I will." He left before dawn Thursday morning, riding out with Stone and 3 deputies to set up positions around the ambush site. They spread out in the rocks above the road, waiting in the heat as the morning stretched toward noon. Quinn's muscles ached from staying motionless, but he kept his focus on the road below. Right on schedule, the stage appeared around 11:30, rattling along the dusty road. The driver was one of Stone's deputies in disguise, and the strongbox was filled with rocks instead of money. Bait for a trap. They waited. Noon came and went. Quinn was beginning to think the robbers had somehow gotten wind of the setup when he heard it, the scrape of a boot on rock behind him. He turned just as a man in a mask raised a rifle. Quinn's Colt was in his hand and firing before conscious thought, 3 shots that sent the robber sprawling backward. More gunfire erupted around him as the other robbers engaged with Stone and the deputies. The fight was brief and loud, gunsmoke drifting between the rocks. When it was over, 2 robbers were dead and 1 was wounded and captured. No one on their side had been hit, though 1 deputy had a graze across his arm. "Nice shooting," Stone said, checking the dead men. "No, either of them." Quinn looked at the faces, now revealed with the masks removed. "Never seen them before. Small-time outlaws from Fort Hancock, according to the one we captured. Webb's gambling debts led back to them. They figured they had found an easy way to make money." Stone shook his head. "Always the same. People think they are smart enough to get away with it." They loaded the bodies onto horses and rode back to El Paso in the afternoon heat. Quinn's hands were steady on the reins, but inside he was already thinking about Lena, about her gray eyes and the way she had kissed him, about the promise he had made to come back. He went straight to the hotel. It was barely past 3 in the afternoon, and he was dirty and powder-stained, but he did not care. He took the stairs 2 at a time to the 3rd floor and knocked on the door to room 17. "Lena, it is me." The door flew open. She took one look at him, clearly alive and whole, and then she was in his arms, holding him tight enough to hurt. He wrapped his arms around her and buried his face in her hair, breathing in the clean scent of soap and something floral he did not recognize. "You came back," she said into his chest. "I told you I would. I know, but I was still terrified." She pulled back enough to look up at him. "Are you hurt?" "Not a scratch." "Did you get them?" "We got them." "Good." She took his face in her hands and kissed him again, longer this time, with more certainty. He kissed her back with all the relief and joy and desperate hope he had been carrying. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. "I think I might be falling in love with you," she said, her voice shaking. "I know it is too soon and probably foolish, but I cannot help it." "It is not foolish, and it is not too soon, not when it is right." He rested his forehead against hers. "I have been falling for you since I saw you feeding those birds, maybe before that. Maybe my whole life has just been waiting for that moment." She laughed, the sound wet with tears. "That is the most ridiculously romantic thing anyone has ever said to me. Get used to it. I have apparently been saving up years of ridiculously romantic things with no one to say them to." They stood in her doorway holding each other while the afternoon light slanted through the window, and Quinn felt something fundamental shift in his understanding of the world. He had spent so long believing he was meant to be alone, that connection was impossible or too dangerous. But here was Lena, who had lost everything and still found it in herself to feed birds, who was brave enough to work for a stranger and strong enough to admit she was scared. She was worth everything. Worth changing for, worth staying for, worth building a life for. The thought no longer terrified him. It felt like relief. Over the following weeks, they grew closer in increments. Quinn continued taking bounty work, but only local jobs that kept him near El Paso. Lena continued managing his affairs, but the relationship had shifted from employer and employee to something more complex and precious. They shared meals, long conversations, comfortable silences. He learned that she loved thunderstorms and hated spiders, that she could do arithmetic in her head faster than most people with paper, that her father had taught her to read using dime novels. She learned that Quinn could not sleep without a gun within reach, that he had nightmares sometimes about his brother dying, that he actually had a surprisingly gentle touch despite his rough profession. She learned that underneath the bounty hunter exterior was a man who was thoughtful and kind and starving for connection. They courted in the old-fashioned way, with propriety and patience. He took her on walks along the Rio Grande at sunset. She sewed him a new shirt in dark blue that brought out his eyes. He bought her a dress in gray that matched her eyes, and she blushed when she opened the box. They held hands and stole kisses, and slowly built something real between them. 2 months after they met, Quinn took her to dinner at the nicest restaurant in El Paso, a place with white tablecloths and candles and food that actually came on plates instead of tin. Lena wore her gray dress and had done something special with her hair, pinning it up with little tendrils framing her face. "You are staring," she said over the appetizers. "I am aware. It is making me self-conscious. I am just memorizing this. You here happy. I want to remember it exactly." He reached across the table for her hand. "Lena, I need to ask you something." Her eyes went wide. "What?" "I know we have not known each other long, just 2 months. Some people would say it is too fast." He pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it. Inside was a simple gold band with a small garnet stone. "But I have never been more certain of anything. Marry me. Not because you need security or because I need someone to take care of me. Marry me because I love you and I want to spend every day for the rest of my life proving it." Tears spilled down her cheeks immediately. "Yes, just like that. No thinking about it. I have been thinking about it since you came back from that ambush, and I realized I would have been destroyed if you had not. Yes, Quinn. Yes, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly. They were both crying now, grinning at each other like fools while the other diners pretended not to notice. When he leaned across the table to kiss her, someone started clapping, and then the whole restaurant joined in. "That is embarrassing," Lena said, laughing through tears. "I do not care. Let them applaud. You just agreed to marry me. I want everyone to know." They were married 2 weeks later in a small ceremony at the church where Lena had cleaned pews for half sandwiches. Marshall Stone stood up as Quinn's witness, and Mrs. Halstead came to stand for Lena. The preacher was a kind old man with a thick Mexican accent who had married hundreds of couples and still got teary during the vows. Lena wore a simple white dress that Quinn had commissioned, and she carried wildflowers she had picked herself that morning. Quinn wore a new black suit and tried not to shake as he took her hand and promised before God and man to love and cherish her all his days. When the preacher said he could kiss his bride, Quinn pulled Lena close and kissed her with everything he had. She kissed him back, and in that moment, all the loneliness of all the years fell away. He was not alone anymore. He would never be alone again. They honeymooned in the hotel, too happy and too poor to care about going anywhere special. Quinn rented the best room in the hotel for a week, one with a real 4-poster bed and a view of the mountains. They stayed in bed late, talking and laughing and exploring this new intimacy with tentative wonder. On the 3rd day, Lena propped herself up on one elbow and looked at him seriously. "What do you want our life to look like?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, do you want to keep bounty hunting forever? Do you want to stay in El Paso? Do you want children?" She traced patterns on his chest absently. "I realized we have never talked about the future beyond getting married. What do you want? I asked first. Quinn thought about it. I do not want a bounty hunt forever. It is dangerous work, and now I have something to lose. But I am good at it, and it pays well. I thought maybe I could do it for another year or two, save money, and then buy some land. Start a ranch, raise cattle or horses, something stable. That sounds nice. She was quiet for a moment. I would like children, someday, not right away, but someday. How many? I do not know. 3, 4, however many we are blessed with. She looked up at him. Does that sound good to you? It sounds perfect. He kissed her forehead. A ranch and children and growing old together. That is all I want now. Just that. She was smiling. Just everything. He pulled her close. You changed my life, you know that. I was just drifting before I met you, going through the motions. And then I saw you feeding birds, and suddenly I remembered what it felt like to care about something. I was so hungry that day, but those sparrows looked hungrier. She laughed softly. Probably not my best decision ever. It was the best decision you ever made because it led me to you. They stayed in that bed talking and dreaming until the sun went down and the room filled with purple shadows. Quinn had never been happier, never felt more complete. This was what he had been missing all those years. Not adventure or purpose or anything grand. Just this. Another person who knew him and loved him anyway. When they finally returned to regular life, Quinn kept his promise to himself and limited his bounty work to local, less dangerous jobs. He brought in cattle thieves and claim jumpers, tracked down stolen property, occasionally worked as a guard for valuable shipments. It was steady work without the high drama of chasing killers, and it paid well enough. Lena transformed his hotel room into an actual home. She hung curtains and put flowers on the table, and somehow made the small space feel like it was theirs. She also got a job working part-time at the hotel, helping the housekeeper manage the linen inventory. It gave her something to do and extra money to save toward their dream of a ranch. By spring of 1883, they had saved enough to make a down payment on land. Quinn found 160 acres 10 miles north of El Paso. Good grazing land with a creek running through it, and an old adobe house that needed work, but was structurally sound. They moved in on a bright March morning, everything they owned fitting into a single wagon. The work was hard. They spent months repairing the house, building corrals, clearing brush. Quinn bought a small herd of cattle, just 20 head to start, and spent long days in the saddle checking fence lines and water sources. Lena planted a garden, learning through trial and error what would grow in the harsh soil. They fell into bed exhausted every night and woke at dawn to do it all again. It was the happiest time of Quinn's life. By summer, the garden was producing vegetables and the cattle had not died or been stolen, both of which felt like major victories. They were sitting on their porch one evening watching the sunset when Lena reached over and took Quinn's hand. I have something to tell you, she said. Something in her tone made him turn to look at her directly. What is it? Are you all right? I am better than all right. She smiled, that particular smile that made his heart stutter. I am pregnant. For a moment, Quinn could not process the words. Then joy flooded through him so intense it was almost painful. You are sure? I am sure. About 3 months along, I think. She pressed his hand to her stomach, which he realized now had the slightest curve to it. We are going to have a baby. He pulled her into his arms and held her tight, his eyes burning. A baby. They were going to have a baby. After years of thinking he would die alone and unmourned, he was going to be a father. Are you happy? Lena asked against his chest. Happy does not even begin to cover it. He pulled back to look at her. Are you scared, terrified, but also excited? We are going to be a family, Quinn. A real family. We already are a family, but I know what you mean. He kissed her softly. We are going to be good at this. How do you know? because we are good at everything we do together. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Lena bloomed with it, her skin glowing, her eyes bright. Quinn treated her like spun glass, despite her insistence that she was perfectly capable of continuing to work. He hired a young Mexican boy named Mateo to help with the ranch work, so he could spend more time with Lena, making sure she was comfortable and had everything she needed. In February 1884, on a cold, clear morning with frost on the ground, Lena went into labor. The midwife they had hired from El Paso arrived and took over with competent efficiency, but Quinn paced outside like a caged animal for 12 hours while his wife struggled and screamed inside. Finally, just as the sun was setting, he heard it, the thin, outraged wail of a newborn. The midwife emerged a few minutes later, smiling. "You have a son, Mr. Xavier, strong and healthy, and your wife did wonderfully." Quinn barely heard her. He was already pushing past her into the bedroom where Lena lay propped up on pillows, exhausted and radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. She looked up when he entered, tears streaming down her face. "Come meet your son," she said. Quinn approached slowly, almost reverently. He looked down at the small red face peeking out from the blankets, at the tiny fingers curled into fists, and felt his heart expand in a way he had not known was possible. "He is perfect," Quinn whispered. "He has your eyes," Lena said. "Or he will, I think." "They are dark blue now, but the midwife says they might change." "What should we name him?" They had discussed names but never quite decided. Lena looked down at their son thoughtfully. "What about James, after your brother?" Quinn's throat closed up completely. "Are you sure?" "I am sure. He should be named for someone who was loved." She handed the baby to Quinn carefully. "Here, hold him." Quinn took his son in his arms, terrified he would break something, but the baby just blinked up at him and made a small snuffling noise. James. His son's name was James, and he was alive and whole in theirs. "Hello, James," Quinn said softly. "I am your father. I am going to do my best not to mess this up." The baby yawned hugely and then settled against Quinn's chest like he had always belonged there. Maybe he had. Maybe this was what Quinn's whole life had been leading toward. This moment, this child, this family. Life on the ranch took on a new rhythm with James in it. He was a good baby, healthy and relatively quiet, but he still required constant attention. Quinn and Lena took turns walking him when he cried in the night, changing diapers, figuring out the mysteries of parenthood together through trial and error. The ranch continued to grow. Quinn bought more cattle, hired 2 more hands, expanded the grazing area. Lena's garden flourished, and she started selling extra vegetables in El Paso. Money was still tight, but they were making it work. They were building something. When James was 6 months old, Quinn came in from checking the herd to find Lena sitting at the kitchen table with the account books, a worried expression on her face. "What is wrong?" he asked. "Nothing is wrong exactly. We are doing fine. Better than fine, actually." She looked up at him. "I was just thinking about the future, about what happens as we grow." "What about it?" "We need to formalize things. Make sure everything is in order legally. What happens to the ranch if something happens to you? What about James? I want to make sure he is protected." She was right, of course. Quinn had been avoiding thinking about such things, but they were important. He visited a lawyer in El Paso the next week and drew up a will, made sure the ranch was in both their names, established a small trust for James. It felt morbid, planning for his death, but it also felt responsible. He had people depending on him now. The years rolled on. James grew from baby to toddler, a sturdy little boy with Quinn's dark hair and Lena's gray eyes. The ranch prospered. They added chickens and pigs, planted an orchard, built a larger house to replace the old adobe structure. Quinn largely gave up bounty hunting, taking on work only occasionally when Marshall Stone specifically requested his help. When James was 3, Lena got pregnant again. This time she was sicker, unable to keep food down for weeks, but the baby grew strong despite her difficulties. In December 1887, she gave birth to a daughter they named Clara, a tiny thing with a full head of blonde hair and lungs that could wake the whole county. 2 children, Quinn said, holding Clara while James poked curiously at his new sister. We are a real family now. We were always a real family, Lena said from the bed. But yes, we are a bigger one now. Life was chaotic with 2 young children and a working ranch. Quinn hired more help, including a young woman from town to help Lena with the house and children. But despite the exhaustion and the constant demands, Quinn had never been happier. He went to bed every night next to the woman he loved and woke up every morning to children who called him Papa. It was more than he had ever hoped for. When James was 5 and Clara was 2, tragedy struck. A late spring storm brought flash flooding to the creek that ran through their property. Quinn and the ranch hands spent a frantic afternoon moving the cattle to higher ground and securing everything that could wash away. He came back to the house soaked and exhausted to find Lena waiting on the porch, her face pale. "What is wrong? Are the children all right?" "The children are fine. But Quinn, a boy showed up an hour ago. He rode from El Paso. Marshall Stone is dead." The words did not make sense at first. Stone could not be dead. He was indestructible, had survived more gunfights and close calls than anyone Quinn knew. How? Ambush. A gang rode into town and tried to rob the bank. Stone confronted them and was shot. He died before the doctor could do anything. Lena took Quinn's hand. "I am so sorry. I know you were friends." Quinn sat down heavily on the porch steps. Stone had been one of the few people he considered a true friend, someone who had trusted him and given him work when he needed it. The thought of El Paso without Stone seemed impossible. "I need to go into town," he said. "Pay my respects to his widow, see if there is anything I can do. Of course, I will pack you some food." Quinn rode into El Paso that evening and spent the next few days helping arrange Stone's funeral and assisting the new marshal with tracking down the gang responsible. It was a grim reminder of the life he had left behind, of the violence and uncertainty that had once been his daily existence. He was grateful to return to the ranch, to Lena and the children and the safe, predictable rhythms of ranching. The children continued to grow. James became a serious little boy who followed Quinn everywhere, asking endless questions about the cattle and the horses and how things worked. Clara was all mischief and laughter, getting into everything she could reach. They fought and played and filled the house with noise. In 1890, when James was 6 and Clara was 3, Lena got pregnant one more time. This pregnancy was easier than Clara's had been but harder than James's. She was older now, 30, and the work of running a household and helping with the ranch took its toll. Quinn hired more help and insisted she rest more, but Lena was stubborn about maintaining her independence. The baby, another boy they named Daniel, arrived in March 1891, healthy and squalling. With 3 children under 7, life on the ranch became a beautiful chaos. Quinn expanded the house again, adding more bedrooms and a proper parlor where Lena could entertain the few neighbors they had. The ranch was profitable now, one of the more successful operations in the area. They had over 200 head of cattle, a dozen horses, and more land than they had started with after purchasing adjacent parcels. Quinn occasionally thought about his younger self, drifting alone through the territories, and could barely recognize that man. One evening in the summer of 1893, Quinn and Lena sat on their porch while the children played in the yard before bedtime. James, now 9, was teaching Clara and Daniel how to catch fireflies in jars. Their laughter drifted across the evening air. "Remember when we met?" Lena said, leaning her head on Quinn's shoulder. "Every day. I think about seeing you feed those birds and wonder what would have happened if I had walked past instead of stopping." "You would not have walked past. You are not that kind of man, maybe, but I am glad I did not have to find out." He kissed the top of her head. "You saved my life, you know. You say that, but you saved mine too. I was starving in a shed when you found me." "I meant you saved my life in a different way. I was breathing before I met you, but I was not living. You taught me how to live again." He gestured at the yard, the children, the ranch stretching out around them. "All of this, it only exists because you took a chance on me. We took a chance on each other." She laced her fingers through his. "And look what we built." What they had built was remarkable. Not just the physical ranch with its buildings and fences and livestock, but something more intangible and more valuable. They had built trust and love and family. They had created a place where laughter echoed and where work had purpose. They had turned two broken, lonely people into a unit strong enough to withstand anything. As the years continued, the ranch grew and the children with it. James developed into a thoughtful young man who loved the ranch as much as Quinn did. He was 12 when he asked if he could start working with the cattle full-time instead of just helping after his schoolwork. "You are sure?" Quinn asked. "Education is important." "I know, Papa, but I already know I want to be a rancher. I want to learn from you while I still can." While I still can. The words reminded Quinn that he was not young anymore. He was 46 years old, had been ranching for over a decade, had lived longer than his own father. Every day was a gift, especially the days spent teaching his son the work he loved. Clara grew into a spirited girl who would rather ride horses than play with dolls. She drove Lena to distraction with her refusal to wear proper dresses and her insistence on following her father and brother around the ranch. When she was 10, she announced she wanted to learn to rope cattle, and Quinn, unable to resist those gray eyes so like her mother's, taught her. Daniel, the youngest, was gentle and artistic. He drew pictures of the ranch, the animals, his family. Lena encouraged his talent, buying him paper and pencils, framing his best work. He was different from James, less interested in the physical work of ranching, and Quinn made sure he knew that was all right. By 1899, Quinn was 52 and starting to feel his age. The long days in the saddle were harder than they used to be. His back ached in the mornings, and old injuries from his bounty hunting days reminded him they still existed. But he was happy in a bone-deep way that made the aches irrelevant. One evening that fall, after a long day of roundup, Quinn came in to find Lena setting the table for dinner. She looked up when he entered, and the smile she gave him was the same smile she had given him 15 years ago when she had said yes to his proposal. "You are getting old, Quinton Xavier," she teased. "We both are. You have got gray in your hair now, and you have got lines around your eyes. Laugh lines, from living with you." He pulled her into his arms. "I love you just as much as the day I married you. More even, though I would not have thought that possible. I love you too." She rested her head on his chest. "Thank you for seeing me that day, for stopping, for everything that came after. Thank you for feeding those birds." They stood in the kitchen holding each other while the food cooked and the children argued in the next room and the sun set over the land they had built together. It was an ordinary moment in an extraordinary life, and Quinn recognized it as such. The next few years were good ones. The ranch continued to prosper. James took on more responsibility, effectively running much of the operation by the time he was 18. Clara shocked everyone by announcing she wanted to be a veterinarian and started working with the local animal doctor to learn the trade. Daniel's artwork got good enough that a gallery in El Paso agreed to display some of his paintings. In 1903, James announced he was courting a girl from a neighboring ranch, a practical young woman named Sarah who could rope as well as any cowboy. They were married in the spring of 1904, and James built them a small house on the far end of the property. The ranch was becoming a family compound, multiple generations working together. When Sarah got pregnant later that year, Quinn realized he was going to be a grandfather. The thought was simultaneously bizarre and wonderful. Him, a grandfather, the drifter who had thought he would die alone was going to watch his bloodline continue. James and Sarah's first child, a girl they named Elizabeth, arrived in January 1905. Quinn held his granddaughter for the first time and felt the same overwhelming love he had felt when James was born, only now filtered through an additional layer of wonder. This little girl existed because he had stopped in an alley 14 years ago and spoken to a woman feeding birds. Every choice mattered. Every moment had weight. Clara never married, too focused on her animals and her work, but she was happy and fulfilled running a small veterinary practice in El Paso while still helping on the ranch. Daniel moved to Santa Fe to pursue his art but visited often, his paintings growing more sophisticated and successful. Quinn was 62 when his heart started giving him trouble. Nothing dramatic, just an ache in his chest sometimes, a shortness of breath when he worked too hard. The doctor in El Paso told him to slow down, take it easier. Quinn tried, but decades of hard work were not easy to set aside. On a warm evening in June 1910, Quinn and Lena sat on their porch watching the sunset like they had done thousands of times before. James and Sarah's second child, a boy named Thomas, was playing in the yard with his sister Elizabeth. The air smelled of summer grass and the flowers Lena had planted years ago. "We have had a good life," Quinn said quietly. Lena took his hand. "We have had a wonderful life. I never imagined I could be this happy. Before you, I did not even know happiness like this existed. Before you, I was starving in a shed thinking my life was over." She squeezed his hand. "We saved each other, Quinn. That is what we did. We saved each other, and we built something beautiful from the saving. No regrets, not a single one. Just that I did not meet you sooner, but I think maybe we had to live through everything we lived through to be ready for each other." He brought her hand to his lips and kissed it. "I would do it all again, every hard year, every loss, just to end up here with you." They sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned from gold to pink to purple. The children's laughter drifted across the evening. Somewhere a cow lowed, a horse whinnied in the corral, the sounds of home. "Quinn," Lena said after a while, "Yes. Do you remember what you said to me that first morning? When I said I was not a charity case, I said you were important. You said I was worth everything." She turned to look at him, and in the dying light her gray eyes were luminous. "You were right. But so were you. You were worth everything too." "We were worth everything together," he corrected gently. "Yes, together." The sun set completely, and stars began to emerge in the darkening sky. They sat together watching the universe unfold above them. Two people who had found each other against all odds and built something that would outlast them both. Quinn's heart did eventually give out, but not for another 5 years. He died peacefully in his sleep at 67, in the bed he had shared with Lena for 3 decades, in the house they had built together on land they had claimed from nothing. He was surrounded by family when he went. Lena holding one hand, James holding the other, Clara and Daniel nearby, grandchildren in the next room. It was as good a death as anyone could hope for, the natural conclusion to a life well lived. Lena lived another 8 years, presiding over a growing family with grace and quiet strength. She watched her grandchildren grow, saw the ranch continue to prosper, stayed active in her church and her community. But everyone who knew her could see that part of her had died with Quinn, that she was counting the days until she could join him. When she finally went in 1923, at 73, it was with his name on her lips and a photograph of him clutched to her chest. They buried her next to him in the small cemetery on the ranch, under a tree they had planted together 40 years earlier. The headstones were simple. Quinton Xavier, 1841–1915, beloved husband, father, grandfather he lived well. Lena Garrett Xavier, 1850–1923, beloved wife, mother, grandmother she loved well. The ranch stayed in the family, passed down through James to his children and their children after that. The original house became a museum of sorts, preserved with photographs and artifacts from Quinn and Lena's lives. Their story became family legend, told to each new generation. The story of a bounty hunter who saw a woman feeding birds with her last crumbs and knew she was worth everything. Because she was worth everything, and so was he. And so was the life they built together from courage and kindness, and a chance encounter in an El Paso alley on a hot August day in 1882. The birds still came to the ranch, generation after generation of sparrows making their nests in the eaves and singing their morning songs. And sometimes, in the very early morning when the light was just right, the great-great-grandchildren of Quinn and Lena would scatter crumbs for them, continuing a tradition they did not fully understand but honored anyway. It was a small thing, feeding birds, but small things mattered. Small kindnesses changed lives. A woman with nothing giving away her last meal to creatures smaller and more vulnerable than herself. A man seeing that action and recognizing it as a window into someone's soul. Two broken people finding each other and deciding they were worth fixing together. That was the story. That was the legacy, not the ranch or the money or the success, though those were real enough. The real legacy was simpler and more profound. Love existed, transformation was possible, and sometimes all it took was stopping in an alley and saying hello to a stranger feeding birds. The ranch stood for another 100 years, adapting and changing as the world changed around it. But the story stayed the same, passed down through the generations like a precious heirloom. The story of Quinn and Lena, who found each other when they needed it most and built something that mattered. The story of two people who proved that worth was not measured in dollars or status or power, but in small acts of kindness and the courage to let someone love you despite your broken places. The story of a cowboy who saw her feeding birds with her last crumbs and knew she was worth everything. And she was. They both were. And they lived and loved and built a family and a legacy that proved it, one day at a time, for all the years they were given.